It's been almost 3 years since the release of the first chapter of Poppy Playtime, and in that time, Mob Entertainment has shown us 3 parts of our favorite game, as well as a bunch of content that was directly related to Poppy Playtime. So in this video, I can tell you with near certainty that the game's plot has been revealed. Hidden clues, VHS tapes, and more have allowed us to get answers to the questions we've been worrying about. And probably now we already know how the story of Poppy Playtime will end, though the creators of the game are still silent about it. The release of the 3rd chapter was probably the most important and expected event in the history of the game, because this part is an integral part of the narrative with a lot of mysteries and riddles that seem to be still unsolved. But by examining these moments in more detail, we were able to come to their unraveling and were able to discover what the developers have been hiding for a long time. And it's in this video that I'll tackle some of these mysteries to finally reveal the plot of Poppy Playtime. Hello dear friends. It's a pleasure to welcome you back to my channel. As you may have already realized, today you are going to watch a video about the plot of the next part of Poppy Playtime. So sit back and let's get started. Many people thought that the title of the 3rd chapter, Deep Sleep, does not carry any meaning, but this is a misconception. For example, the dreams that we fell into under the influence of red gas played a significant role. It is in these dreams, the creators of the game allow players to understand who the main character is in fact. I propose to break down in order. The first dream, which falls into our character, occurs when you get into the house. He inhales red smoke and then begins to wander the corridors of the house while finding some items that open memories. At the end of this dream, Huggy Wuggy pounces on our character, causing him to wake up. But it's not as simple as it might seem from the first time. This situation vividly describes the terrible past of our character. It can also include the inscriptions on the walls that say, "Guilt haunts you." Reverse sounds from the radio, which if you listen in reverse order, will tell you about our character's accusations for not showing up at the factory on August 8th, 1995 for the hour of joy.
I find your presence intrusive. After all this time you return. You come in here and you kill and murder. You pillage and destroy. Your presence was demanded 10 years ago and you didn't show up. 8/8/1995. You were supposed to be here. Why weren't you here? You missed the event. You missed the meeting. You missed the party. You have no right to be here. 8/8/1995.
And also a VHS tape that tells you about the doubts of the newly arrived Playtime factory employees and the gnawing conscience. It is these moments that speak to the heavy burden our character carries because of working at Playtime. However, how terrible was this job? And to that question, I have a crazy answer for you. But before that, I should clarify that we are sure that our character is a former employee of the factory, but his position and his duties remain a mystery to us. But I have a certain assumption, so walking in a feathered dream, our character will get into a separate room, which has a writing on the wall. It is from this we can assume that this room is the office of our character, and based on previous versions of the game, in which we could notice that offices are provided only to important employees, such as Elliot Ludwig and Stella Graber, while the places of the factory are filled with small workstations, which are apparently intended for employees below the rank. Also, an additional indicator is the character's encounters with monsters who still recognize him, despite the fact that 10 years have passed. From this, we can safely conclude that he held a high position, and in his access were some of the secrets of the company. From here we can understand why he is tormented by conscience, because he was directly involved in the development of monsters, as well as in conducting experiments on them. But will you and I be able to dig even deeper and learn new secrets? My answer is yes. You and I already know how the scene where our character falls into sleep for the first time ended. Huggy Wuggy has attacked our character. You might have thought that this attack was just a PR move and nothing more, or the developers decided to add a touch of nostalgia to a beloved character, but none of these options are true. The developers might as well have shown us all the dead characters during this dream, but that's not happening. So what's the big deal? Throughout the dream, our character comes across various radio recordings that tell us about the problems of the Playtime factory, dead employees, and most importantly, tragic news that tells us that a dead boy was found in the estate of the factory's founder, who was missing some body parts. You should think hard about why this boy pops up in our character's dream. Why not others? Because we know about the experiments on orphans, experiments called Bigger Bodies Initiative. Apparently, this child is a significant figure. Most likely our character was experimenting on his body, and perhaps it was from him that Huggy Wuggy was obtained. In addition, once in the room where there is a TV with the image of Huggy Wuggy, there is a change of scenery. This room looks like a hospital room. Perhaps this is where our character was watching sick children, and most likely one of these children was the same boy with the radio recording. Maybe that's why our character is so emotionally disturbed in this dream. And if you don't believe it, you can prove it with VHS tapes, which were published on Mob Entertainment channel. These tapes were not appreciated in their time, although they are very important to the plot. But today I offer to dissect just one in detail. Perhaps you are still puzzled and you have a hard time with this information, but after watching this video to the end, everything will become very clear. After watching one of the VHS tapes in detail, my attention was attracted by one frame, which depicts the estate, which apparently belongs to Elliot Ludwig, and apparently this is where the tragedy, which was mentioned in the radio, took place. If we look a little more closely, we will see that there is a body hanging from the tree, and it is very likely the body of the boy who eventually became Huggy Wuggy. Apparently Huggy Wuggy decided to run away and visit the place where he was last time in a different form. That's why the monster's capture happened at the estate and not somewhere else. It turns out that you and I have solved the mystery of our character, finding out that he was not the last person in the Playtime factory and was also involved in all the experiments. And the reason for his return to the factory is himself. His conscience does not allow him to sleep well, and that is why he returns to the factory to correct the mistakes of his past. And the best part is that I know how he's going to right his wrongs. You've probably all wondered why he came back here in the first place. Although in all 3 chapters we haven't heard a single word from the character himself, but as you might have noticed, all the action is happening to save someone's life. The very first letter in Poppy Playtime, Chapter 1, hints to us that there are still alive employees in the factory who need help. And in dialogues with Poppy Doll and Ollie, we heard very often that everyone needs us. Our character is the one they need and the one who can save a bunch of lives. But how will our character single-handedly be able to save the remaining staff, get rid of the monsters, and keep himself alive? After all, our player is not omnipotent. Even with the use of additional devices, he cannot do all these tasks. What if I told you that our character would choose a slightly different path, the path of least resistance? The death screens will help us understand it. Every time our character is killed by someone, we see a bunch of different summons, each of which carries definitions of meaning. The one question that has always bothered me about these summons is who is doing them. Although I have some theories about this, I'm going to present only one of them, which I think is the most true. One of the most important features is the difference between the death screens in the 3rd chapter and those in the previous 2 chapters. Perhaps you have also noticed it, because the messages here do not always appear, and in my opinion, it is not for nothing. The display of messages directly depends on the cause of death. So for example, when dying from a fall, the player will observe a completely blank screen. But if the death occurred from a monster, here is a different matter. Can these details hint to us that the toys are trying to convey some important information to our character, you ask me? And I will answer you, yes, quite possibly. If you dive deeper into this topic, it may become more obvious to you. For example, messages with the words, "The prototype has saved us. Isn't he wonderful?" Who but the monsters we know can use such phrases? There's another quite interesting point. After studying the death screens in detail and going back to the 2nd chapter, I managed to find much more interesting messages that read, "Nobody is here by choice," and "There are fates worse than death," which openly hints at the plight of the monsters in the factory. But some phrases can even raise the level of motivation, cheer up the player, especially those phrases that have the addition, "get up" at the end, because our character is obliged to finish what he has already started, because everyone needs him. But what exactly is needed from our character is also hidden in one of the messages on the death screens. Burn this place to the ground. In this way, we can safely answer the questions we have set for ourselves. The purpose of our stay in the factory and how to atone for our sins are clear from this phrase. After all, it is true that burning down this unfortunate factory is probably the best idea, along with all those who are there, thus helping the toys to find peace. After all, as was mentioned in one of the death screens, there are fates worse than death. Burning down the Playtime factory is exactly the main task of our character. That's why he came back there to make this task a reality. But how do you pull it off? Let me tell you all about it. Remembering what our character was busy with throughout the 3rd chapter, I advise you to pay attention to the gas extraction zone. In the conversation with Ollie, he sets us a specific task to redirect gas from one tank to another. It would seem that there is no sense in this mission, and for a long time I thought that it was a useless activity. But as it turned out, these tanks are connected to a whole system of pipes, and having fulfilled all Ollie's orders, we will redirect this gas into the depths of the factory. You say, what's the big deal? But it's important to remember that red gas not only has a soporific effect, but it's also flammable. It follows that our character will descend lower and lower until he reaches a certain point, from where he will fulfill his task of setting the factory on fire. I can assume that this will really be the best solution, because our character will not only free himself from mental torment, but also help the children who were imprisoned in the bodies of monsters, including through his fault. Write your opinion in the comments about this ending. Don't forget to put likes and subscribe to the channel. See you soon. Bye-bye.